So, good evening, everyone. My name is Oshin Castillo, Director of Health and Human Services, and this evening, Mayor Andre Sea and the Department of Health and Human Services is hosting a webinar. I do want to thank, we have a great panel here today to talk about rental assistance for individuals who may not only need assistance, currently, but who may have some back rent situations as well in order to find services that may help you, kind of guidance as well on how to go throughout the process, not only for rental assistance, but as well as for rental right. This evening, we have our members of our department. We have Jalil Monet, who is our rent leveling coordinator. We have Tanae Joyner, who would be our moderator this evening. We also have June Zeider from New Jersey Court Ombudsman's Office. We have our Northeastern New Jersey Legal Aid Services. We have Michael Frostek, Patterson Task Force Representative Debbie Nicholson, and from Passaic County and a consultant and a partner with us, Solus Inc., we have Frank Jones, who will be speaking to you this evening just about different services throughout the city of Patterson, throughout Passaic County. So today I'll give it right over to you so we can begin at the end of this presentation. It's social on our website and on the city Facebook page. We will have a contact information if you have information for any of these individuals, kind of what their office phone numbers are as well. We will also have some of this information presented and submitted on our website and Facebook page in Spanish. So para todas las personas que hablan en español, estamos haciendo una presentación de asistencia para alquiler o para renta. Vamos a tener estas informaciones disponibles en nuestro sitio, en nuestro website y en nuestras páginas sociales con información en español tan pronto como mañana. So, vamos a comenzar. Today I'm handing it right over to you. You're on mute.
All right, thank you, Oshin. So let's get to it. First, we want to we just introduced our panel, and I'll just go over the agenda again. We're going to first hear from our rent leveling officer, Jalil Monet, and our New Jersey Court Ombudsman officer, June Zeider, Northeast New Jersey Legal Services, Michael Frostek, Patterson Task Force, Debbie Nicholson, and Solix Inc., Frank Jones. Jalil, I'm going to hand this over to you.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jalil Monet. I'm the rent leveling administrator for the city of Patterson, and I'm just going to explain a little bit about what the purpose of the rent leveling office is. The rent leveling office assists landlords and tenants in understanding our municipal rent control ordinance and how it applies to rent leveling apartments and properties. I also serve as a mediator between property owners and tenants, especially when it comes to disagreements with rent increases. I provide information not just on rent increases, but also on annual registration requirements, information on vacancy decontrol, and property owners can also obtain capital improvement application and substantial rehab applications through our office. We have over 3,000 properties registered so that we can track those rental increases. The type of properties that are under rent control would be properties constructed prior to December 23rd, 1999. Properties with 2 or more dwelling units. Mixed commercial properties also with 2 or more dwelling units. Exempt properties would be those constructed after December 23rd, 1999. Single-family homes, even if it's rented. Federal and state subsidized housing, for example, Section 8 properties or units, those would be exempt. Condominiums, commercial spaces, I'll give a small example of that. If there's a property, let's say it has 2 apartments above, bodega on the first level, that bodega would be exempt. This is only for dwelling units. Hotels, motels, dorms, and also if there's a property that's a rooming house and is licensed by the New Jersey Department of Community Affairs, that particular property will be exempt. Our allowable increases are 3.5% for those who are 65 and older, or seniors, and those who are disabled. If you're 18, 25, 30 years old, but you're legitimately disabled or receiving Social Security disability income, that 3.5% would also apply to you. Everyone else is 5%. The owner can increase the rent once in every 12 months with a 30-day written notice at the time of the lease renewal. I do want to say I get a lot of calls for tenants. I know that they're struggling to pay their rent, let alone rental increases. They can give me a call so that way I can try to work something out between the property owner and tenant. And also, if you need assistance in calculating your rental increases for the year, you can also give me a call regarding that. Documents that you will need to bring when you're filing a complaint. This is really important. Rent receipts or proof of payment, lease agreements, notice of increase, or any other document that's relative to your complaint. This is my contact information. I'm right behind City Hall in the downtown area. And also, if property owners, if you need to obtain, or tenants, if you need to obtain our rent leveling ordinance or property registration, you can visit the City of Patterson's website. It's free. Thank you.
Thank you, Jaleel. Also, I want to remind everyone that this presentation will be available on our Facebook, our YouTube Live, and also on our city website, just in case you want to go back and jot down any information that you may need. Next, I'm going to pass this over to June from the New Jersey Courts Ombudsman's Office. June, you're muted. Sorry.
Okay, I'm good now. Good evening. My name is June Zeter, and I am the Ombudsman with the Safe Business Superior Court. Right away, I'm sure many of you may be unfamiliar with the term Ombudsman and perhaps vicinage. My brief PowerPoint will go into what an Ombudsman is and our role in the Superior Court. As far as the word vicinage, each county in the state of New Jersey has a Superior Court. However, some counties are smaller than others, so they are grouped together, such as North Sussex and Hunterdon, Warren, and Somerset counties. These groupings are called vicinages. The state, because we are so densely populated, has a vicinage all of its own. So the New Jersey Judiciary Ombudsman Program. What is an ombudsman? The term ombudsman is of Swedish origin, where it means representative. It was developed to investigate complaints against government officials and agencies, but it has evolved to include much more. There are two different types of ombudsman. There's the classical and organizational one. As you can see, the classic receives grievances and represents the citizens before government, and the organizational ombudsman is a confidential and informal information resource, complaint handler, and hopes the organization work for change. Then we have the classic ombudsman, who would be a corrections ombudsman, acts as an advocate for the inmates of the correctional system. In the Passaic County Jail, Officer Raymond Saez is the ombudsman for the Passaic County Jail system. And we have the ombudsman for the institutionalized elderly, who investigates allegations of abuse or neglect of elders living in nursing homes and other long-term care facilities. Then we have the organizational. An example would be an insurance claim ombudsman, or an ombudsman for the Newark public school system, and that person serves as an information conduit and conflict resolution resource for parents and other members of the community. You may be asking, what is the judiciary ombudsman? Where do they fall? And the judiciary ombudsman is an organizational ombudsman. We take complaints, we advocate for change in the system, but not directly advocate for the individual. In the world of the courts, attorneys are the advocates for those appearing in court. Ombudsmen have their own mission statement, which emphasizes customer service, equal access, and concentrates on public information, community relations, and court user assistance. Public information. We try to educate the public, such as what I'm doing tonight. We talk about court services and processes. We put there's newspaper articles, publications and materials, online materials, and we do training. We do training on the Office of the Ombudsman, and we even put in a part about customer service if that is requested. Community relations. Prior to the pandemic, we had many groups come into the courthouse. They would sit in with a session before a superior court judge, and after the presentation, the judge and the group would have a back and forth questions and answer period. We have a speakers bureau. If anybody wants somebody from the courts to come to their agency or to their group or to their school to talk about the courthouse, to talk about job opportunities, we have people who do that as well. And then we sponsor workshops, educational programs. Currently, we have webinars on the expungement program, in which we offer that twice a month, and we show people how to expunge their criminal record. We also have a divorce workshop, which explains the divorce application and the divorce process. And then we have a matrimonial motion workshop, so that after your divorce, it's a matrimonial packet that if you have questions on how to complete that packet, it's kind of big, we have a workshop on doing that as well. And court user assistance. We do a lot of one-on-one. Prior to the pandemic, we've had people come into the office. During the pandemic, we work remotely, and we explain to people explanation of processes, general information. We take complaints. If somebody feels that they have not been treated fairly by members of the court system, we sit down, and sometimes those situations are miscommunications about how the court processes work. And sometimes those are areas that we do need to investigate. But what we try to do is resolve them. We also recommend improvements. We have a statewide survey that we give to people so that they can tell us how their experience was in the court. We want to know this. We love hearing about people who had a great experience where everything was done efficiently and they were treated in the best way possible. But we also are open to seeing other comments as well. And when we do, we take every survey very seriously. So we encourage people to fill out those surveys, whether they're in the court building or using our services online. We have ombudsman material. I have brochures. If people want to find out more about the program, I would certainly be happy to provide a brochure. And if you need to contact me directly, my address is the Passaic Business Superior Court, the Mandak-Womack Resource Center, 71 Hamilton Street, room 130, Patterson. The telephone number is 973-653-2910, extension 24032. My email address is passaichelp.mailbox@njcourts.gov. I bring you all this information to let you know that the Office of the Ombudsman, the Resource Center, is here to help anyone navigate the court system. We can help you determine which forms you may need, and we can help assist you in completing those forms. What we cannot do is give you legal advice, which means we cannot tell you how to best proceed with your case. We can only provide you with the tools to do what you want to do. Our primary customers are self-represented litigants. But as I said, we help everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, June. Now I'm going to hand it over to Michael. Michael's from Northeast New Jersey Legal Services. He's an attorney. He has a presentation to share with us.
Thank you today. As Tanae said, hi everyone, my name is Michael Fostek. I'm an attorney in the housing unit with Northeast New Jersey Legal Services. And today I'm going to go over an overview of the eviction process before the pandemic, how it was handled in the courts, and talk a little about how that process has been affected since the pandemic began. So the first thing to understand is this program is just for general educational purposes. It's not intended to be legal advice or to create any kind of attorney-client relationship. I can't give legal advice to anyone's specific problems over a presentation. So if you're seeking help with a specific problem, you should reach out to our office or an attorney and schedule to speak to someone. Northeast New Jersey Legal Services is a nonprofit organization that helps assist people who qualify for our services with free civil legal help. And we have multiple departments. We serve housing needs, family law needs, immigration needs, things that may come up with senior citizens. There's a benefits unit that we have, some tax-related issues we also serve. And so if you feel you would need any of those types of services, you can reach out to us, and if you qualify, someone would be happy to talk to you. So the first thing to understand about the eviction process is in New Jersey, all tenants are entitled to court process. Landlords cannot use self-help to remove a tenant or their belongings from their residence. And what that means is self-help is when a landlord essentially takes it upon themselves to remove the tenant or their belongings from the residence. If this happens, the police can be called because the tenant is not required to vacate if the landlord's taking things into his own hands for whatever reason. A court order and court process is required for an eviction to take place, and evictions are only to be conducted by a court officer or law enforcement. The first thing that happens when there's going to be an eviction proceeding is there needs to be a cause of action, meaning that there needs to be some reason that the eviction proceeding is being brought. And this can happen under one of two New Jersey statutes. The first one is called the Summary Dispossess Act, and this applies where a landlord is living on the same premises with a tenant, and there's less than two or less rental units on the residence. In this case, it's easier for the landlord to move forward with evictions. Essentially, all that needs to happen is the landlord can give 30 days notice after the lease expires, and that would be good cause to potentially bring an eviction action. Whereas under the second statute, the Anti-Eviction Act, the landlord needs to have specific good cause listed under the statute to evict a tenant. And this applies to non-owner occupied residences, and the protections are a little stronger here. Some of the examples of things that might be good cause are if the landlord is looking to personally occupy, non-payment of rent, habitual late payment, or destruction of property, to name a few, but not all categories. So after there's cause of action, the first thing that happens is the landlord will file an eviction complaint under what they call the LT docket in the courthouse, which stands for landlord tenant. The complaint is then served to the tenant at least 10 days prior to the court date. And then the court date will be given, and on the day of court, the parties will first have a chance to try to settle the matter. Now, when you sit down to try to settle, there's no obligation to enter into a settlement agreement, but if you can come to some kind of terms, you can enter into a settlement agreement, but you want to be sure that you're comfortable with the terms of the agreement, because if you enter into one, you will be held to the terms of the agreement. Now, if the parties can't settle the matter should proceed to trial that same day. And once it goes to trial, if the ruling is in the favor of the landlord, something called the judgment of possession will issue, which means that the landlord receives a court order ruling that the landlord is allowed to have the tenant evicted. Once the judgment of possession is granted, the landlord can then apply with the court for the next piece called a warrant of removal, no sooner than 3 days after the judgment of possession was issued. And the warrant of removal is the court order that actually allows the eviction to go forward and be executed. So once the warrant of removal is received, it gets posted on the tenant's door again by court officer or law enforcement, and the eviction will proceed no sooner than 3 business days from the posting of the warrant of the removal. So there's a short window of time between the trial or the settlement and the actual eviction taking place. So after the warrant of removal is served, but before the eviction is formally carried out, there's still a few remedies that tenants can potentially petition the court for. One is what they call a stay for orderly removal. And this is a request to the court for more time to vacate the premises, where you're still agreeing to go, you just need a little more time to get your things together and get things sorted. Whereas the second option is what they call a hardship stay. This is a request to stay on the premises due to some kind of hardship that you're facing. Some but not all of the things that are required for a hardship stay is you have to be able to show that you've been searching for another apartment and you haven't been able to find one. And at most, a judge would give an extension of 6 months. The last option is if there's some reason to vacate the judgment by the filing of an order to show cause. This is where you're petitioning the court to essentially say that if I'm evicted, there's going to be some kind of immediate and irreparable harm that's going to take place unless the judgment is vacated for my eviction. And then the court would make that determination based on that standard whether or not the eviction judgment should stand. Now, when it comes to whether you want to proceed to trial or whether you want to settle, and to understand any defenses you may have, it's always best to speak to an attorney when making that decision. So you would always want to consider that if you're faced with an eviction proceeding. And if in the event you are evicted, there's a certain way that the belongings have to be handled as well. The landlord can't just take your belongings and throw them out. He has to give proper notice that he's disposing of any kind of remaining property, and they would also have to reasonably believe that the tenants left the property with no intention of asserting a claim to the property, and the eviction would have to be completed. So that's generally the process before the pandemic started. Now, since the pandemic, Governor Murphy issued Executive Order 106 on March 19th of 2020. And what this did was this put a stay on eviction proceedings going forward until 60 days after the state of emergency ends in New Jersey. And so far, that's been renewed on a monthly basis. So the stay on evictions is currently set to expire in the middle of July 2021. And this may or may not continue to be extended, but to this point, so far, it's been extended on a monthly basis. Now, this doesn't necessarily stop all eviction proceedings from going forward because there's an exception. If an eviction proceeding is determined to be an emergency that is in the interest of justice to proceed before the moratorium lifts, then the proceeding can still go forward. But there's a bit of a process in determining that. First, there would be a hearing at court to determine whether or not it is in the interest of justice to go forward. And if it is determined at that hearing that the trial should take place sooner rather than later, the trial will take place as I just previously described. Now, non-payment of rent is not considered an emergency that would trigger that happening. So non-payment of rent cases would be covered under Executive Order 106 as an eviction proceeding that's not going to proceed in an emergency capacity. However, it's important to understand that the rent is still due and owing for any unpaid rent while you're staying there, even though the eviction proceedings are on hold. So if people are having trouble coming up with rent, that's still accruing and is ultimately going to need to be addressed. And another thing that's been happening as a side effect since there's been the stay on evictions, landlords can also go through small claims or the special civil part, depending on how much rent is owed, and pursue a money judgment for any rent that's due and owing, so that they're essentially seeking a order saying that the rent is in fact due, and they have a judgment from the court saying that they're owed the rent, but still you can't be evicted. Another major change has been that court hasn't completely stopped altogether. It's just, generally speaking, court cases are currently proceeding via platforms such as Zoom, Microsoft Teams, And parties who do have a court date goes forward, they receive a notification of the court date and an electronic link to participate in the virtual courtroom, much like what you're seeing now, but just in a court setting. And of course, participation in a virtual court proceeding should be treated the same as if someone was physically appearing in court, because the only difference really is that it's being held remotely instead of physically at the courthouse. Now, the court, because of the pandemic, is in the process of considering making changes to the way eviction proceedings are handled at this time, but it's unclear what exactly those changes may be and when they would go into effect. But the pandemic has prompted reconsideration of how best the eviction process can be handled going forward. So while what I'm telling you today is currently the process, it is subject to change potentially in the next coming months or however long. Another thing that the pandemic has changed is the way that someone's security deposit can be handled in an eviction proceeding. Governor Murphy's issued another executive order that allows tenants to request in writing to their landlord that the security deposit be used as payment for any rent that is due and owing. So this request has to be in writing to the landlord, and if the security deposit is used in this way under the executive order, it would need to be paid back within 6 months after the state of emergency ends, or by the time the lease would be renewed, whichever is later. Under normal circumstances, security deposits are either returned when the tenant vacates, or if there's unpaid rent or damage beyond normal wear and tear, a landlord can hang on to the security deposit. Also, under normal circumstances and pandemic circumstances, there's other situations where potentially the security deposit can be applied towards rent based on whether certain notice requirements have been given. Now, another typical defense when it comes to landlord-tenant proceedings is whether or not there's habitability issues. A landlord has a warranty of habitability to provide a tenant with a residence that's safe and decent to live in. So typical habitability issues can include problems such as broken fixtures, lack of services, pest infestations. And what happens when habitability issues exist is the tenant needs to notify the landlord in writing that there's some issue that needs to be fixed and give them a reasonable amount of time to repair the issue. If that happens and the repair continues to go by unabated, then one of the remedies that the tenant has is they can withhold the rent as a way to try and force the landlord to make repairs. Now, frequently what will happen once this starts is the landlord will file for eviction based on non-payment of rent once the tenant withholds. And then when the hearing comes up, the tenant raises the habitability defense, and it's called a Marini hearing. Now, the most important thing about utilizing this as a defense is the tenant must have all of the rent that's due and owing to deposit with the court the day of the proceeding. Otherwise, the court will not entertain the defense because they're going to take the money and hold it while they determine what, if anything, needs to be done. Now, the reason I'm explaining the habitability defense and generally how it works is because with the pandemic and the suspension of the eviction proceedings, it's made it more difficult to potentially use this as a remedy since the eviction proceedings aren't going forward. So it can still work, but it's just more difficult to use. And that is everything that I have for my presentation.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Next, we'll hear from Patterson Task Force. Debbie Nicholson.
Good evening. You have the flyers. Okay.
Give me 1 second, Debbie. Okay. Okay, Debbie.
Okay. So Paterson Task Force is a non-for-profit agency in the Patterson area. We're here to serve. Our mission is to help the poor improve their quality of life and become self-sufficient by addressing the causes as well as efforts of poverty. During COVID-19, we have received several funding for several different programs. One program that we are currently running is the Home Energy Assistance Program. That's to help people with their utility bills. The utility bills are what I have seen with the process. Some of them are hitting $2,000, $3,000, $4,000. And we are here to help them if they just come in and comply. As you see on the slide, there are requirements. They must bring in the documents. They have to be approved. Also, if they're approved if they pay their own heat, they're also eligible for emergencies. Emergencies went up to $700 this year if somebody has a shutoff for them to get a little extra assistance. If they're on food stamps, the Board of Social Services are supposed to process their application, but they can always come into one of our two locations, one on Circle Ave and one on Broadway, to apply, or if they have any questions, the staff can assist them with that. And the winter termination program is fastly approaching because I do believe that, please don't hold me to that, the deadline is going to be June, where PSE&G are going to start turning people off. Usually the deadline is May, but they extended it out a little bit. So June is going to be the cutoff, and if they have a large balance, the PSE&G will be shutting people off very shortly. Another one of our COVID-19 emergency programs is where they can get cleaning supplies. If you know anything and you've been in any of the stores, you see cleaning supplies have just skyrocketed during COVID. I guess because a lot of people are using hand sanitizers, bleach, Lysol, but it's very costly. And we were granted funding to assist people with cleaning supplies, paper towels, toilet paper, which was a big issue when COVID first happened. So they can go to our office on Washington Street. We're getting ready to move, but contact them on Circle Ave, and they can sign up. And the young lady, Miss Maldonado, will let them know what days that they can pick this, pick the items up that's needed. And they come out once a month. But if they contact the office and on the main number, someone can direct them to the location that they need to go to. My expertise is more on the housing part of it. I am doing back rent and back mortgages. So my task is to assist individuals who are behind in their rent, and due to COVID, they do have to prove that they're behind in their rent. They do have to prove how they were affected. The biggest effect is when people were let go in March of 2020 and did not receive unemployment to almost August or September. I am still getting people where they were delayed or they had to appeal their unemployment process. So that have left them several months behind. Sometimes unemployment retro their payments, and some clients did not get retro payments. They also missed the first $600 stimulus that they were getting on top of their unemployment. So my job is to assist them, and with 3 months, I'm only maxed out at 3 months with them. There were some other agencies, Catholic Charities, and some others that were helping with the back rent, but they had exhausted their funding as well. When they come into my office, we put a plan together, because if not, I know that they will be evicted or sent to court after the courts and whatnot open. So we put a plan together. I talked to the landlords on their behalf to try to come up with some kind of payment arrangement. And basically, a lot of the clients are paying down some of that debt. The other part to this is mortgage assistance for homeowners. I can do up to 3 months of mortgage payments for homeowners. The key component to that, they have to have been approved for forbearance. Because the forbearance, if they have gotten approved for the forbearance, that takes that past due, some of that past due, and put it to the rear of their mortgage. They do have to bring in proof of their mortgage. They do have to show it is past due, and they have to show that they have been approved for forbearance. If they're not approved for forbearance, it's no assistance for them whatsoever. And they also have to prove that how they were affected by COVID. And it doesn't mean that they had to have COVID, they just had to be affected by COVID, and they would have to prove that. But the majority of our clients are where they lost their job back in March, April, May, June, July of 2020, and they're still trying to do catch up. Okay, and that's the end of my presentation. Are there any questions? The number is on the screen. It's best to try to get me by email because I have clients from the time I walk in to the time I leave out doing applications for the rental part of it, but you're more than welcome to contact me at your earliest convenience. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Donna. Next, I'm going to pass this to Frank Jones from Solix. He will also be talking about the back rental assistance program.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you today. I'd like to point out I'm also here with Donna Boyce, my colleague from Solix, and we're here to talk about the Passaic County Emergency Rental Assistance Program. And what happened recently was the county recognized that residents have been struggling with the ability to pay their rent or maybe facing eviction due to the coronavirus pandemic. So based on the Impact Passaic Housing Security Initiative and Emergency Rental Assistance Program, they will provide rental arrears and temporary rental assistance to low and moderate income households with a substantial reduction in income. And they have to be qualified for unemployment benefits or have experienced a financial hardship due to the COVID-19 pandemic. This program will also provide county residents with a variety of support services that impact housing security long-term, like finding a job, getting behavioral health support, child care, and financial coaching, to just name a few of those. Applicants may be eligible for a maximum of 12, and there's new guidance coming out, so the months may vary, of emergency rental assistance program to help pay their rent for rent arrears and future rent to the extent that the funds are available. And as of right now, the maximum amount of relief available for each application is $15,000. Now, applicants will also need to demonstrate that their income does not exceed 80% of the area median income, AMI, for those that are familiar with it, and could not pay their rent due to being directly or indirectly impacted by COVID-19. Donna, was there anything else you wanted to add before I pull up the site?
Thanks, Frank. That was wonderful. I think you hit all my points. I'll just mention the wraparound services, which Frank alluded to, that are also available, and you'll be able to see it a little bit more clearly as Frank walks us through the application. Thanks, Frank.
No, thank you so much. Okay. Okay, so hopefully, can everybody see my screen? Just wanted to verify. Okay, great. So this is the Emergency Rental Assistance Program portal that will be available on the 17th when we go live. We're currently in pilot. So essentially, this outlines that it's a two-step application process. The tenant will begin the application process at the outset, and then the landlord will be contacted for additional information to finish the application. And if approved, they'll then be notified and the rent will be paid to the landlord. If not approved, obviously we'll notify them of that as well. There's various documentation that will be needed, for identification purposes. I mentioned the below 80% AMI for 2020 has to be there as well. And I just want to point out a couple of things. Acceptable documentation also includes SNAP, TANF, unexpired Medicaid card, things of that nature. And I would ask that when the tenants do start to apply, that they have their landlord's telephone, first and last name, and email address handy, as well as a recent utility or similar bill with the renter's name and address on it. Then we would click next. I've taken the liberty to pre-populate some of these fields just so to expedite this process. But let's just say, for convenience sake, I wasn't able to pay my rent in March of 2020 and March of 2021. How much rent do you pay per month is a question that's asked. How many number of people in the household, and the total income for that household. Then you go here and you will enter the members of the household, so you can add a household member, but for this purpose I just chose one. So then next, you go to the next page, which is the tenant and landlord information. Fill that in, select your gender. I'm just going to populate with anything here. Let's say Patterson. So you go here, you fill out zip code, populates that, then you have to confirm your email address, phone number, and then as I stated before, it'll start asking for landlord information. So let's say Stanley Roper is my landlord. Next, then you come to what is called the certification page. So you must certify these various things in order to continue. So you check these boxes. I'm not going to read all of them, but these are the things that we need the tenants to attest to. Give your digital signature. Understand that it's a digital signature. Yes. Then it's time to upload the files that would be needed. And I'm not going to do that now, but then you would just hit submit on the application. So fairly straightforward process in regards to filing for the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. Like I said, this is intended to launch on May the 17th. So please be mindful of that and aware of the communication that will come out from the county. I do know that there have been flyers passed around with Impact Passaic on it. So please be on the lookout for that. And hopefully, the funds have been increasing. So the more people we can help, the better. Donna, is there anything else that you wanted to mention?
No, other than it's in Spanish and English, correct, Frank?
Oh yes, I'm sorry. It is the website itself is in Spanish and English, and there is a number that you can call to also help with additional languages that may be necessary. So we do have that as well. And
Okay.
Thank you, Tanae, for pulling up the flyer there.
Yeah, I just wanted to pop it up there really quick so if people see this flyer, they can kind of relate it back to your presentation. It should be coming out soon, and you said the go date is May 17th, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Perfect. Okay. And that is it for our presenters today. I want to thank everyone for joining. I'm going to pass this back to our Director Castillo to end out the meeting.
So first of all, Tanae, thank you. You've been a wonderful moderator. And I want to thank all of you on behalf of the Department of Health and Human Services and on behalf of Mayor Saya as well. We know this has definitely been a difficult year, and that's actually an understatement, year and a half now. And our goal is to make sure that our community has all of the services, or at least all of the information of services available. So we want to thank you for your continued support, for your continued partnership, for the residents of the city of Patterson. We will have a lot of these major points on our website and social media page starting tomorrow, as well as some of the key points, just to make sure that you can always go back to it. This will be saved on our YouTube page as well. But if you have further questions, please feel free to contact our office, Department of Health and Human Services in the city of Patterson, 125 Ellison Ave, first floor. And our phone number is 973-321-1242. We will have everyone's office contact information as well posted starting tomorrow. So if you want to have a question for a specific agency, you can direct any questions to them. Or further questions, you can contact the Department of Health and Human Services, and we will make sure that we refer or get you to the right location. So I hope this was beneficial. I want to thank you all one more time on behalf of the mayor as well, and we want to thank you for your continued partnership. Hopefully, we'll be having a lot of these for our community as we move on into normalcy as well, and we start really thinking about needs and services that we can provide for the city of Patterson residents. So thank you all, and I'll be seeing you all very soon. Thank you. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you, Jalil.
You're welcome, thank you.
Thank you all.